Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Manisha Mangus. I'm new to HighRoad Solutions. I am the Director of Inbound Marketing. I apologize. I was actually supposed to attend the session last month in February, but I was stranded in an airport in Newark for the day due to bad weather. So I had to pass the baton back to Suzanne for this session. But I'm excited to be here today. I hope you guys are too. My understanding of this program is that this is all about inbound, which is exciting. For me, I've spent kind of the better part of my career in digital marketing. I've spent recently the past 3 years working at ExxonMobil leading change management strategies for their digital properties as they get up to speed on markets in the U.S., Russia, and China, specifically for motor oils. So personas that we dealt with were about gearheads. His name was Max. He was a big gearhead. He certainly was interested in kind of fast cars, good engines, digital oil changes, and then Sam was more the family guy who also kind of interested in taking care of his car, but really kind of getting the worth out of it from a value perspective. So really the kind of guy who would take his car to get the oil changed. So just a little example of kind of how just kind of wherever you are, you can apply those personas, and you'll probably hear me beat the drum on that one a lot. And like I said, I'm excited to be here. We're going to be talking about topics for inbound marketing in particular. I think what's great about that particular framework or methodology is, if you're still getting familiar with it, is that what they've done is, what HubSpot's really done is they've done a really good job of kind of taking a framework, taking all those digital marketing pieces that we normally deal with kind of in that world and putting it into categories and actually mapping it out and kind of saying that, hey, as you start, right, we all have the same set of goals. We're looking for converting strangers into customers, and how do you go through that, right? So it's overlaying a lot of kind of concepts, right, that we've heard before. We've heard content marketing, we've heard interactive marketing, right? We've heard social marketing. There's, and then lead scoring on top of that, funnels, right? So a lot of kind of concepts that have been thrown about, a lot of concepts that have been discussed, in various organizations, right, in different departments, but it's all kind of synthesizing it into a framework that you can follow. So I think it's really kind of interesting and exciting to kind of see that come into place. So, from the association side of things, I'm definitely curious to know what you guys think specifically about, the inbound marketing methodology as a whole. So certainly as we go through the rest of the year, if you have questions for me, if you have topics or things that you'd like us to further explore, certainly reach out to me directly. So we're going to go through today in March. Happy St. Patrick's Day. We're going to talk about spicing up your website with interactive calls to action. All right. So just a reminder, it is informal, but if you could guys put yourself on mute while I speak, that would be great. It makes it a little bit easier to kind of get the message across. We're brown bagging it, so certainly feel free to put yourself on mute and have lunch. What I've noticed that HighRoad has in the past 4 weeks that I've been here is that there are a ton of resources available. It's almost a little overwhelming in some ways. So again, you'll be working on putting some stuff in front of you to make sure that you see it, because there are a number of things that you can leverage. So obviously all the recordings that are from the previous sessions, those are always available on demand. And there are a number of toolkits here that are kind of secret little gems. So again, kind of as we go out throughout the year, I'll be calling out in particular some of those that you could use, right? So they may be kind of classified as, here's the toolkit for your website strategy, or scoring your website, but you could do a lot of other things with that basic toolkit. So definitely keep that in mind. And if you haven't already checked out our page, definitely feel free to do so. And we will be sending out a survey to kind of gauge the program so far, see how we're doing, and see what else we can kind of improve in that to add value for you. Something that Suzanne probably referenced last month is essentially we have a survey that's kind of out there. It is essentially taking a metric or a kind of a snapshot, a basis of what's going on in associations in terms of digital marketing. The previous reports have identified a lot of patterns of behavior, interesting trends. Certainly that helps with budgeting, when you're sitting down to think about, what does that marketing mix look like? So feel free, just kind of know that it's out there. This year's session is open, a survey is open, and we certainly encourage you to go ahead and participate in the results. Okay. All right, so then let's get started, right? So we're going to be talking about calls to action. So I always find that, especially when we're talking about adult learning, an hour is about the limit, and we kind of got to go through the paces and go through some definitions. So I always like to start with that. So again, since we're talking about inbound marketing, I'm going to pull out this nice little graphic that tells you the methodology and really kind of points out where those calls to action actually live, right? So all your calls to action, and you've probably seen them before, but the whole purpose of a call to action is, in essence, to take that visitor and convert them into a lead, right? So we're really kind of using that framework of let's connect with those particular visitors that come to our site, right? They're not strangers because we've attracted them. They've clearly come to any one of our digital marketing properties. They come to our marketing, our digital properties, essentially because they found us, right? There's something we put out there that resonated with them, with their need, with whatever pain they had in their buying cycle, right? And they have actually found us, right? Either by signing up on an email, or they've landed on our website, most importantly, or landing pages. And now what we want to do is we want to kind of further that level of engagement. We want to take them to the next level and move them from a visitor, kind of a known quantity, to an even further qualified one. So we want to move them into that lead bucket. All right, and we do that through a variety of ways. One of them is landing pages, forms, contacts, but really all of them kind of they translate into calls to action, right? So regardless of kind of where you are in the digital space, calls to action are what essentially compel the user, compel these visitors to make kind of that next meaningful step with you, right? Whatever it might be. And again, we want to think about that from a what are those steps, right? Sometimes people have a lot of expectations, high expectations, right? That call to action button on there is going to get them to submit the form, or they're going to give me their email address, or they're going to buy, right? Those are larger kind of calls to action, right? But it doesn't mean that anything that you do in the process to get them there isn't some sort of call to action. And so I want to start with these two definitions. I always like going to Wikipedia once because it's crowdsourced, and, it's kind of it gives you a good snapshot of everything across the board. But, looking at what's the definition for a call to action, I find two statements that are pretty interesting that I wanted to discuss. So this first one, I'll let you guys read it and absorb it a little bit. So what it says is, what is a call to action in marketing? A call to action, or a CTA, is an instruction to the audience to provoke an immediate response, usually an imperative verb, such as call now, find out more, or visit a store today. Right? So what's interesting in this is, again, it's definitely saying kind of, I want the user, I want whoever it is who's looking at my call to action, I want them to do something immediately. Right? So it's like direct marketing, it's something, right? It's you want a response out of them. Usually kind of, as marketers, we always have to think about, like, what do we want them to do, right? So it's interesting to kind of see what they say here. It's usually an imperative verb. You see something like a strong verb, right? Not like, see this or whatever. We want you to do something. Take that next step so that you can call us, right? So call us now, find out more, or visit a store today. So it's interesting that they have those are kind of the popular calls to action. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but there's a slight connotation to calls to action are bad, right? In the world of marketing, they're good. We want calls to action. We need those. You should never be sending out an email, right? If you think about all those best practices that we've talked about recently, you should never be sending an email without a call to action. You should never be putting a blog post without a call to action. You should never have something that you want to kind of convert without having that call to action, right? So call to actions are really good, right? But the perception, depending on who you are, right, outside of that marketing world, it actually might be bad, right? There are too many calls to action. I'm overflooded. I'm overwhelmed. I see too many ads. Ads are call to action, right? So we have to kind of start to think about, what is my call to action? What do I want people to actually do? Am I selling? Am I doing the hard push sell, as in you must buy my ebook, or you must buy my course or register, give me money type of thing, or is it something else? So this other statement that's also from Wikipedia is also saying this, which I think is interesting as well. So what this is saying is clever marketing strategies often combine a series of small CTAs. These smaller CTAs create a pattern of behavior that makes it easier for the audience to follow through with just one last CTA, completing a more demanding request had it been asked without context. So I highlighted the word context here because I think that makes all the difference, right? And this is, kind of a fundamental underlying principle of what inbound marketing talks about. You have to create content that is meaningful to your user, right? To your visitor, your stranger as they go through the cycle, if they go through life, the journey inspired cycle, right? Life cycle, that it's meaningful content that applies to them, right? So there's always context for anything that you put out there. So it's interesting that it's calling into kind of play that calls to action have to have context to them. What's also saying here is that everything that you want a user to do on your website is essentially a series of calls to action. So if you think about it, there are smaller calls to action, as in click on this to view something, right? Click on this to read the product description. Click on this to see who is attending the conference. Click on this to see what the agenda is, right? To that ultimate bigger ask, right, if you will, of a larger call to action, which is go ahead and register, right? And so what it's saying is these stringing together the right small sequence of smaller CTAs will make the bigger ask easier for the user to complete, right? So if you think about it, you just break this down. If you were to send an email to your constituent base, right, to your membership saying, oh, registration is open, click here now to register, right? So, too bad we don't have polling here, but it'd be interesting to kind of see, like, how many people think that would be effective, if that's an effective call to action. How many people think that, do we need a better lead-in, right? Early bird registration, do we need to say something about it? Like, actually say, do you want to know what the early bird rates are? Click here to see them. Now they're on your website. Now you've got them on your website instead of just an email, where you've got additional pieces kind of surrounding that core piece of information that you could then lead them through, right? So I think that's what this concept is coming to, that everything that you're doing now, especially kind of in terms of your websites themselves, everything that you kind of put on the page has a meaning, an intent, and a purpose. And you can kind of string together and call them as clicked as call to action, string them together to get to that larger final kind of call to action. And ultimately, it's a lot easier to do that rather than just asking, just register. We haven't given enough of a compelling reason, right, for them to register. So I think what makes it interesting, both of these statements kind of, combined together, right, knowing what we know about audiences today and what we know about inbound marketing, is that there has to be a lot of emphasis or understanding about patterns of behavior. Right? So again, it goes back to your personas, it goes back to the buyer journey guide, right? And we're looking at, how do people behave on your website, right? So it's looking at analytics, it's what they click on, like what do they look like? What do they look at before they make that final kind of call to action? They actually convert, right? Do they shop around? What if they do shop around? Do they compare? What do they look at? What are they doing? And so it's really kind of understanding what those patterns of behavior are, so you can structure those smaller CTAs in some sort of sequence, right? It's also, notice that in both statements, call to actions, they're not tied to just the web, right? They're not tied to a certain type of media. It's not just website. It's not just email marketing. It's not just on your phone. And it seems to be kind of channel media independent. They're all action oriented. Right? And those are the ones, again, you have to take pause and think about action. What does that mean, especially from an association standpoint, right? It's not the retail buy, which is a lot easier in some cases, but you have a whole set of program offerings that, can feed into that action-oriented, viewpoint, right? It's learn. It's be informed, right? It's like, things like that, like get connected, network. Things are a softer sell, but not necessarily soft in the sense that it won't convert, right? But it's using some of those action-oriented terms that are kind of, distance itself from, visit a store or call us now type of thing. I already talked about small CTAs, so really the whole point is the context, right? So now it's kind of, you're starting to see that some logic behind, inbound marketing and the way you use call to actions and the way you kind of put everything together, all of it has to have context. So you cannot have a call to action that doesn't have any context behind it. It all has to move something forward, right? So all CTAs, large or small, they contribute toward directing the user to complete an action anywhere on any channel, right? That's essentially it, right? So if you think about that now what are you wandering into? Now you're wandering into territory about user experience, right? User-centric design, especially when you're talking about websites in particular. Right? So now think about it from the framework of your e-commerce package, right? Your e-commerce pages. What does that look like when you've got your product descriptions there? with an image. What does it look like, as you kind of start to track them and see they're on this page, they're looking at the product description, they've read, any sort of reviews or ratings around it, and now you want them to, click add to basket or click to, add to wish list, right? What will it take to get them to click the next button? And if they stop, that's where you kind of go in from an analytical point of view and see what stopped them, what prevented them. Did they see something else that they were distracted? So that's kind of it, right? So now you're starting to break down your calls to action, kind of in the format of what does this user experience look like. You can do it from a registration standpoint. You can do it from a membership join standpoint. You can do it from, the search standpoint, your on-site search, right? You probably see a lot of websites now that have the kind of the helpful, I wasn't able to find what you were looking for, but here are all the categories of stuff that we do have, right, kind of put together. All of that is kind of designed to say that don't leave, right? The whole point is to stay on the site. Obviously, you want it to be sticky, right? So the call to action, it's almost like you kind of maybe have a tier or a hierarchy behind them where you have kind of like the overall, I want you to do something, purchase or convert. But in addition to that, if you don't do that, that's fine. We have all these other ways in which to interact with you, and we still want to, right? So here are all the secondary ways or the smaller CTAs in which we communicate with you and kind of, move you along that funnel. Right, so personalization forms. So we kept the dots in there because they're now, in the world of user experience, now everything opens up, right? So the whole point is to keep all your websites sticky. It's really what's kind of getting down to. So I like to go to retail, not necessarily to say we should emulate it, but we should be inspired by it, mostly because they are, the whole point is for them to take a prospect and convert them into a customer, and they do it well, right? So we have become very used to seeing very nice e-commerce systems, that string together certain calls to action in place for us to make, to make that final purchase, right? So I took an example and kind of highlighted in some areas the steps or the smaller calls to action, just to kind of see, where you can go and what they feel would help the user get to that point of saying add to cart instead of just saying here's a picture, add to cart. And you'll see all these bells and whistles, right? And so again, think about it like, there was some thought into going and putting all this together. Nobody kind of came up and said, well, you know what, let's slap a picture on here, let's slap all the stuff to it, and let's have that add to cart button. And hopefully they'll click on it, right? There is some sort of strategy behind it, right? And so, from our definition of what we saw, where it's kind of a sequence of smaller CTAs leading to the larger CTA, which would be difficult, right, without the context if you just went with the larger CTA, right? So step one is to, obviously, you're on this page, you're looking at a bag, you're seeing the picture. Maybe step two is you want to see the larger picture now, or you roll over to zoom on it just to make sure that this is in fact something of interest to you. Step three is now I'm taking a look at the details. Now I'm looking at the product details, from an imagery standpoint. What does that look like? What's the inside of the bag look like? What are the different colors? Maybe the size thing. Step four, and this is the interaction piece, right? So all of these are kind of passive, right? They're clear. We call them calls to action because they lead you through that sequence, but there's nothing I've actually done yet. But now I'm going to interact. Now I'm going to step to step four, where I'm saying, you know what? Now I want to click, I want to select my color, right? And so theoretically what they're saying is the smaller call to action says, select your color, please select your color. It's then motivating me or moving me along so that the next thing I do is enter my quantity, right? And my last thing I do before I add to cart is personalize it, right? So kind of in Mark and Graham, if you know them, they're a retailer, they do a lot of personalized, cute little stuff. Most of it, you can personalize. They've got, a whole font set that you can pick out, lettering, all sorts of neat little stuff, right? But what they're saying is kind of in their mind, the way they've constructed it is that you kind of go through some of these passive, kind of lower end call to action before you get into the, what, I want in the color. So I'm going to click my color. I'm going to see what that looks like. Then I'm going to enter my quantity, obviously, and then I'm going to personalize it. And once you personalize it, I'm going to see my initials on the purse, and I'm going to say, yes, this is what I want. I'm going to click add to cart, right? So when you think about this, right, think about when you, because of an assessment or evaluation standpoint, think about it when you go back to your own e-commerce site, right, or your own registration sites or your join pages, right? Think about, strategically, what are the calls to action that you want people to take, right, before that make it easier for them to hit next or submit. right? That could be in the form of price calculators, it could be in the form of polls or quizzes, it could be in the form of anything that helps the user interact with you. And so that's some of the interaction, right? So when we talk about interactive calls to action, it's not a, it's a call to action where you click on it and does something, gives you something back. It could be, but it's not, it's more the, the interactive piece is, what makes it sticky, what moves you along to get you to the next step, right? So what I called out here too are two other things. They're kind of more on the periphery, right? So the ultimate thing, right, the goal of this particular page is to make sure that you hit add to cart. Right, but that doesn't mean that there are other things you can't do as well, right? So it's kind of set out in section A, to help you with your decision making. Here are the other products. Customers who also viewed this item also viewed the following, right? So perhaps this isn't quite your thing. Now you want to move on. There's a way so that it's an effort to prevent you from leaving, right? Same thing with the social sharing. It's an effort to kind of say, like, at least interact with us on some level. Maybe it's not our main call to action, but it's still a call to action, something that we can measure, right? Something that we can report on, and something that perhaps we can do in the future, right? So again, why use calls to action? Because it makes their website super sticky, right? And moves the user down through the buyer's journey. And then, of course, it's converting those visitors, hopefully into leads, right? So what's nice about CTAs is that you can map them to specific goals and metrics, right? So in sitting down, kind of looking at your page, what you want to think about is, like, what do we want to accomplish? Do we want to have as many eyes on this as possible? And that's it, right? It's okay to leave the page. Do we want them to at least give us their email address before they leave the page? Let's say we put them on, our blog page, right? Before they leave, right? Before they hit they kind of move their cursor all the way up to the little X. Let's put something in front of them so that they give us their email address, so that now we've captured them, we can send them a blog digest, right? So you want to think about these things so that you have something, right? So you don't kind of fall into that trapdoor of having your call to action be confused with with kind of traditional pop-up banner ads or pop-up ads, right? That's not the point, right? Calls to action are very specific in nature, and they're very strategic in how you use them and where you place them, right? So there are many different types, right? Again, interactive or not. All of them to a degree are all interactive. They're clickable. You have banners, you have images, you have buttons. QR codes are definitely a call to action, forms and contextual text boxes. So something I noticed today that I haven't seen before, maybe it's just I haven't been using my desktop email application too much, right? But in Yahoo Mail, I just noticed that the little pop-up that came up here that says get the app. So did you know, access your email from the Yahoo Mail app? And probably because, it's working off of an algorithm, knowing that, typically I do check my Yahoo Mail on my phone, right? But I don't use a native app. I just kind of use it in a browser. Or perhaps, it's anyway. So the whole point is that what it's trying to do is trying to give you an upsell. It's kind of low on the page, not interfering with my emails per se, but it's kind of, making that helpful suggestion. And that's really what you want to do. You want to think about calls to action that are helpful. So you want to overcome that old school perception of the calls to actions. I think in the past, they were easily confused with those pop-up ads, right? So this is not about, put it up everywhere in the hopes that somebody will click on it, right? This is all about strategy, and this is how it ties back to inbound marketing. Right? Inbound marketing goes back to knowing your personas, knowing what you want them to accomplish, knowing where you want them to click next, and knowing what you want to offer them next, right? In the whole effort to keep it sticky and keep it kind of inside of your digital properties, wherever they might be, the whole intent is to establish that relationship with the user, right? So you want to use those clicks and those call to actions like in a very strategic way. You don't just throw them up on any page, right? There's always like some sort of intent behind it. So what I encourage you to do is kind of now that we have some of this background, think about the way you browse any site, right? And again, like I said, we should be inspired by what retail does, right? They are in a position sometimes to do things that we may not necessarily, from a budget standpoint, be able to do, but we can definitely leverage some of their ideas. So again, their core audience is very different, but ultimately, we are looking to tap into those same audiences that react in a certain way, right? So I'm on Good Housekeeping. You want to think about context, right? So just even what they framed up in terms of content, right? The call to action someone would probably, we could have a conversation or a debate over, is it an action where you do something, or is it something you just put in front of a user, right? Just content itself, right? So contextual content is kind of the best way to grab the attention of the user, simply because you're interrupting them, but you're not interrupting them in a way that's distracting. You're kind of putting something in front of them that still goes with the flow of what they're looking for. Right? So I'm on the Good Housekeeping website. I move my cursor up to close the window, and then I get this little pop-up, right? It's just like full screen, actually, with a piece of content that says, unlock our exclusive list, right? We got 50 best cleaning tips. Just enter your email address so I can get my tips, right? And then a little clever thing that says, no thanks, the soap scum isn't bothering me. Right, so it's just kind of knowing your audience and knowing what you can do to kind of get them to interact with you, right? So it's just a nice example of something that works. So again, like I said, there are different types of interactive CTAs, right? You can have kind of the basics, the ones that are just links. Again, QR codes, I think, fall into that category. Calculators, they also fall into that category, and that could be anything, right? It's a calculator to say, distance per mile, kind of when you're trying to gauge, your pricing for renting your car, to, size measurements, right? Things like that, right? Something that just makes sure that you have more information than you did prior to using the call to action that helps you move to that next call to action, if you will, right? So in the form of forms, product comparison charts are often a good one, quizzes. The ones I call them, I think they have an actual name. I apologize. I don't know what they are. I think I call them call to action exit CTAs. Essentially, kind of when you move up and are ready to leave, you'll have something kind of presented in front of you first to make sure that you've got kind of a last chance to do that before you're ready to go. And contextual content as well, right? So just some things to think about. So as always, right? I think in the part of the series, what we do is we go through some basic definitions. And then we take a look and see what everyone else is doing. So again, we'll kind of see who's doing it, what they're trying to accomplish, just in the intent. The intent here is to kind of inspire you again, or make you think about, ways in which you can go back and kind of apply and evaluate some of your functional kind of web pages and see, where, or at least to be able to identify, here is what we're doing. We are saying that, here's my small call to action. Here are the series of steps I want the user to do, right, with the final ask, and see how effective they are. And then, perhaps going back to your metrics, right? Going back to those Google Analytics, right, your metrics to kind of see, does that conversion actually happen? Are people clicking on the right things? And then if not, then either, is your call to action clear enough, or is there something that you should improve? So Apple, again, kind of definitely user-centric design. If you come to their website, they have a number kind of things on their site that you can kind of focus in on, right? So if you, let's say, you could watch the film, you could watch the keynote, you could watch the TV ads, again, it's kind of knowing your audience, right? So this may not necessarily work for an association unless you're on a registration site, unless you're on your event site, right? In which case, watching the keynote after the event, right? Watching whatever interviews would be something that would be compelling, right? So it's kind of knowing your audience, right? So the Apple users, we do like kind of looking at some of that stuff. Another type of interactive call to action is a comparison, right? So they're using product comparison here. Again, from an association standpoint, depending on kind of what you are offering, you can apply something like this, to any piece of content that you have, or any kind of type of program or offering that you have. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be selling something that's an actual product, kind of a manufactured product, right, if you will. So again, it's essentially giving you, here are all the models, and then based on what you're clicking on, you can see the information that makes it most compelling for you to kind of move to the next step, right? And that's kind of getting more information, getting more detailed specs, or, finding a store near you, right? That's often a very kind of typical call to action that you'll see, especially when you're using your mobile devices, right? You're using your mobile devices to find or search a product, right? The next step is, now that you've got your information on the product, let's tell you where you can find it next, right? And that's often a very big conversion metric that's measured to kind of say, did you click on that link to find the store, right? And if you ended up kind of in your store locator page, then did you make that final step to either map directions or call that particular store, or see what they carried, right? So the value of what they click through the value of what they click through actually goes back to kind of how you track the conversion of, you know, of your user, of your visitor as they kind of make that process, right? So things to think about. Use the same example again, right? I'm using this again, you know, just to kind of show you there's another kind of way in which to phrase things, right? So remember, this is about, you know, making sure it's a piece of content they want to put in front of you. They want your email address so you can get whatever you're looking for. And they've got a no thanks, you know, it's not bothering me. So again, same concept, right? So this is the marketing graham site I was talking about earlier. I come to this page on my desktop, right? And the first thing I see is 15% off right now on your entire purchase, right? Enter your email address, take advantage of a time-sensitive offer, right? So right up front, knowing kind of, you know, likely you are not a returning customer, right? Because we've not been able to figure out, and we can't identify who you are yet. You haven't signed in, right? So likely you're new. So we're going to give you a little coupon or discount so that you can move forward. So again, you know, something that you can be inspired by, that, you know, things to think about, right? So if your user is, you know, has purchased a webinar, or they've purchased an ebook, they've purchased something kind of in your store, they're going through the checkout process, or they're still perhaps browsing, you could have a pop-up that says, you know, we're running a special, here's a discount coupon, here's something, right? And in an effort to make sure that you don't leave your item in your shopping cart, that you do in fact take that next step, right? So, so just kind of a different way to leverage the same type of call to action in terms of functionality, but its intent is very different, right? So what's interesting is that on the same site, but in a mobile view, this pop-up doesn't appear, right? So if I'm on my phone, and it's a little bit more distracting and it's harder, right? So from that perspective, especially when you're thinking about user design, especially now since we had to qualify everything, we're making sure things are responsive and adaptive, right? We're looking at a phone, there's less screen space. So you definitely don't want to block your user from doing anything that, you know, you don't want to interfere with your user's experience, right, by putting something, you know, up there that blocks everything, right, that says, you know, just, you know, give us your email address because we'll give you a coupon code, right? So it's kind of taking into the design journey, like the user's journey, thinking that if I'm a mobile user, right, so really I need to make sure that everything's searchable. I need to make sure that there's a, you know, I can see the menu very clearly. I'm there probably because I want to buy something through my phone. Therefore, I don't want to bother them with like a sign-up thing. I'll catch them on that. What's more important is I make sure that they continue to browse my site while on their mobile device. So this kind of left-hand section is what I see when I'm on their homepage in mobile view. So they get this little image here that says you're invited to the egg hunt. Find an egg and get a special treat when you're added to your basket. And look for the symbol. And by the way, we've hidden 13 eggs. And here's an expiration date. Very simple. So on the home page, right, they actually don't have this here. It's kind of, you have to scroll all the way down if you were looking at a desktop view. Right, so it's just definitely kind of a recognition that if you're a mobile user, we want we want you to stay longer on the site. We want, you know, you're probably coming here because you're looking for something specific, right? This is how we're going to entice you, right? This is our call to action. Right, so I start looking around, and I finally find. I started thinking, like, I don't know, how am I going to find these eggs? You know, I don't want to search for everything, but I think they've probably figured out in their algorithm, or probably in their stats or metrics, kind of where best to seed some of these little symbols. And so I picked a category, and I found my egg. Right, so when I further click on it, it actually tells me additional information once I'm looking at it in a mobile view again, saying, congratulations, you found an Easter egg, take 20% off with this code. All right, so it's very kind of specific, right? So, you know, my point here is to kind of say that, you know, really kind of mapping out your journeys and mapping what those call to actions can be, right? Don't feel like you're limited to just an experience that's desktop-based or just member-based. It could be a combination of member, non-member. It could be other segments based on who you're able to identify, and then thinking about kind of what content do you have available to them, and what could, again, kind of, you know, seed them and kind of get them to nurture, you know, that engagement with you so that they make another step, right? So again, this is a retail site, so they really want you to buy. That's the whole point. So thinking, if you're on your phone, I'm going to give you a cute little thing to see if you'll bite, right? And it's more likely to incentivize me to use it, and that I feel like I've done something about it. right? So again, very similarly, you've probably seen this as well. You can use this for social media as well, right? So something that you want a person to like, you're building awareness, right? Again, it goes back to your goals. What are you getting people to do? If you want them simply to just have eyes on it and build awareness, or perhaps share within their local network, you can have a call to action that pops up that says, make sure you like us. Another example is another website called Chef Steps. So their call to action is interesting. I haven't seen this one before. It's, kind of right up front in the center of the homepage, up in the front saying, "Dear Chef Steps, I am so-and-so, my email is so-and-so. I want to join the X number of others to learn to be a better cook and sign up," right? So again, hitting on a couple of things, right? So Chef Steps, they're known for putting together little how-to videos. They do molecular gastronomy. So I know the site because other chefs, my husband's a chef, and so he often goes to the site to see what's going on in world of sous vide cooking, or just kind of, the more advanced techniques, just fun things to try and think about doing, right? So, but their whole premise is educational, right? So really, they want as many people as possible as part of their network, who can kind of then further proceed to interact with them on YouTube and other social media channels, right? So right up front, because, for them, the most important part is to get your email address. They want you to be part of their community. So they're kind of self-declaring, right? So if you're not the professional chef, but you're a chef in training, or you just like cooking, right? You like trying, experimenting new things. You're self-identifying. You're kind of making it very clear. I'm going to give you this, right? I want to be part of all the other people who want to learn how to be a better cook, right? So it's a very kind of self-identifying, empowering statement. Tapping into some of the community stuff as well, right? And kind of saying that, what if there was like 200,000? I could be 200,001, right? So it's kind of tapping into the name and lights thing in a different way, right? But it's a call to action. It's very clear, but it's also very clear what they want, right? And they're also kind of they know their audience, right? Chefs are not, people, there's no harm in giving their name and email address, because they know I'm going to in turn, right, as Chef does, I'm going to send you information that's going to help you become that better cook, right? So again, something to consider. You can, on your landing pages, right, of course, kind of do those conversion factors that way, right? You can have something, bold, kind of as a statement as this, right? If you've got an ebook and you want to say, let's help you with those tough questions, if you're doing a certification promotion for an online certification course, right? Again, and you've got the study guide, you could again do something to say, kind of join the group, right, for those tough questions. You can do a lot of things, right? So again, it's about, what kind of interaction do you want, and what does that ultimate kind of experience look like? So a lot of this has to do with understanding your user and giving them enough so that they're ready to kind of take that next step. Free shipping, who doesn't like free shipping? I like this because every time I come to these sites, I hate paying for free shipping. So again, if I get this prompt right up front saying, sign up and save, you get free shipping on your next order over a certain amount, I'm likely to do that. But it's more so because they know the type of user that comes to their website, right? They probably have gone through, taken a look at their metrics, they've seen their abandoned cart issues, right? They've probably taken into account kind of a lot of metrics to say that, most people possibly kind of bulk, especially kind of when we're in the off season, right? In terms of shopping, it's not Christmas time, it's not high seasonal gift giving. What are the things that we can incentivize people to do, right? It's either a coupon, but how about, we hit on the shipping thing, because that's a percentage that always gets everyone, and everybody wants to save on shipping, right? So it's just a kind of clever way to tap into what you already know about your users and what they're looking for, and really kind of working with that. So likely in the past that you've heard us talk about Bright Info. They're an interesting company. What they do is really great. What they do is essentially they leverage all of the content that you have on your site and create meaningful contextual offers of information. So what that means is you don't have to figure out if a person is on a certain page, what should I put in front of them. They have an algorithm that goes behind the scenes. It takes it and kind of essentially crawls your entire site and all of your properties where you've got your content. It evaluates, you kind of sit together and you figure out, what do we call content? In the traditional sense, is it white papers? Is it articles, or is it downloads, or, is it blog content? Is it a webinar link? What are the things that kind of constitute as content that we produce as an association? It indexes all of that, and then based on their algorithm, right, they start to make those meaningful connections, essentially kind of saying that, if you are on a certain type of page, right, that has to do with a particular topic, like dermatology or something, it will start to kind of feed you, kind of not interrupt, but kind of on the side, start to feed you additional information. And the intent of that is to make sure that you continue to stay on the site and you continue to kind of move forward with the organization, with the site that you're on, right? So it's finding meaningful ways in which to offer information. We use it in a couple of different ways on the HighRoad side as well. We use it as kind of like the exit CTA, just before, essentially with some rules in place, kind of saying, if you've seen one article and you're ready to go move on, before you go, we want to make sure that you sign up so that you receive the digest. If you start to scroll through many articles, you start to continue to scroll through a couple of things, then you can do, we'll show you different information. So they do this with many of their clients, right? So again, what's interesting here is the way in which you can use it. So hopefully this is starting to inspire you about ways or things that you can put in front of your visitors, right? Again, in an effort to make your site sticky, but also that also align with other things that are happening within your organization, right? So it becomes very timely. So if you're thinking about putting your entire marketing schedule together, right, and you're thinking about, it's time for the convention, or it's actually, more importantly, it's time for calls for papers, right? You don't want to hit it in a corner. You don't want it just on the email that you send out, kind of in a block or a banner ad. You want to put it front and center, right, somewhere on the site so that all the people who come to your site, they notice it, right? So again, it's a nice way to kind of bring attention to some of your content as well as your programs, some of your activities in a way that further engages the user, right? Again, the same thing, the concept of, are you ready to leave? If you are, before you go, right? So it's personalization to a degree. It's really just kind of making the discussion between you and the visitor a little bit more intimate, right? Kind of saying that we do know a little bit about you. We know why you're here, right? You're here to look for this type of information. Therefore, we're giving it to you. Here's our value add, right? Without you having to ask, right? And we found organizations have a lot of success with that. Another organization, again, using the same thing, but kind of in a different way, right? They've got like the free web chat up at the top, right? Just kind of front and center saying that, hey, this is what we've got going on. It's part of the contextual ads, right? Part of the retargeting program, right? But in addition to that, they've got the banner at the bottom, right? So an exciting look for the future content, right? Again, depending on kind of where you are on the site, how long you've stayed on the site, what else you've been looking at, it starts to add those particular features together. Same site, but I'm in a different section, so it's going to present me with a different call to action. But I think that's a value here. Again, going back to the inbound marketing framework, you really need to know your users, and you need to know what their pain points are. And you don't want to become part of their pain point by sending them or giving them the same piece of information again and again. That's why, and I think that's why, calls to action sometimes get so easily confused with pop-up ads. Right, kind of saying, I'm just going to put it in front of you again and again and again. And really, that's not the point. The call to action is very specific. Its intent is to make sure that you are able to do something, and therefore making sure it's as personalized as possible to the user wherever they are on the site. That's why it becomes so key. Right, so you definitely want to be sure that when you're thinking through that entire experience and what that should look like, right, even as you're thinking through your smaller CTAs as they move into larger ones, you're thinking about some of these things, because that does make a difference. We know that users have a very short attention span unless they're looking for something specific. And if they notice that you're putting something in front of them that is not relevant, they are less likely to click on it. They're less likely to further engage with you. They're more likely to ignore it altogether the next time you do it, right? And perhaps, the next time you do have something that's specific, but because they're already in that mindset, they're not going to pay attention. All right. So I think if you've joined us before, you've probably heard us talk about SFN, Society for Neuroscience. They're also using Bright Info, again, for the same concept, right? So they've got the tools on the side. If they're looking at program development, here are some tools, right? So you start to see stuff that's very, very contextual and based on the actual source content you're looking at. All right, this is an actual resource, right? And therefore, they're giving you recommended content that's of value, that's also that's also relevant to what you're looking at. All right, so different ways in which to kind of further engage with the user and make sure that they understand kind of what you're trying to communicate to them. Right, so top articles in Neuro Online, and this is because, again, they're in an area of the site which is actually specific to what the user is looking for. Right, so Bright Info, again, a very powerful way in which to leverage the content that you have. And I think the big key takeaway is, across the board is, one, recognizing that you have a lot of content in many different formats, right? It's not necessarily the traditional white papers or articles, but beyond that, and all the materials that you produce, whether it's webinar links or whether it's just a link to resources, it's materials that, you can leverage a certain tool to actually help you craft those call to actions so that they're kind of more contextual based and you can put them in front of you. So that's all I had today in terms of calls to action, dealing with interactive call to actions to spice up your website. So again, the callbacks here, things to remember and things to think about are that, one, you really want to think through that entire experience, right? So what I would highly suggest is picking a couple of things, going by your metrics. There is no reason why you can't go to Google Analytics, pull up some pages that are popular, and see where people are clicking. See if they are in line with some of the smaller CTAs, or see if you have, if you're able to identify and kind of categorize, here are the larger CTAs, right? The ultimate ask or the ultimate thing we want is for a user to join, or it's for a user to register, or if it's a user to submit their email address or something. That's the ultimate one. Then you want to go back and see what are the smaller calls to action that would help them move along that process to submit, right? To actually join or to buy or to register, right? What are those, right? And they could run the gamut of anything, right? Again, we saw there can be QR codes, it can be pop-ups, like actual contextual windows that pop up and tell you to do something or just give you information so that you can be better informed, right? So there's a whole number of things. So don't feel like you're kind of limited to the button, right? Especially in email marketing, we get caught up in the button. It's got to be a button, right? It's the entire message, right? As long as your message is consistent in terms of, what am I doing, what am I providing to get that user to move to that next step, that's really kind of that's really the ultimate goal. So again, think of it from that perspective. Think about what you can do to supplement some of those calls to action. And then, of course, as always, you always want to go back and spend some time in seeing how effective your calls to action actually were. You want to go back to those metrics. You want to go back to those conversion metrics and take a look and see, were they effective? If they were effective, is there any room for improvement? And if they weren't, more importantly, what could you do to tweak them? So again, in today's technology age, technology is no longer the limiter, right? So as digital marketers, we are very empowered. We can go in and change something and then wait a week and then see what happens, right? So again, I encourage you, if you can, go ahead and change your call to action. Do a slight tweak on it, right? Change the imperative verbs to something else. Make sure that there's some other additional step in there that a user could, some piece of information or something that you could provide them that helps them get there, and then see what the impact is on your metrics as well, right? You always want to be measuring, that kind of rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. You always want to be in that cycle where you were doing, kind of evaluating what you're doing and making sure that it's working. And if not, there's no reason why you can't change it, right? So I think an appropriate quote to end today's session is something that Craig Davis said from Brand Karma, which is stop interrupting what people are interested in and be what people are interested in, right? So again, from that disruptor, to some degree we acknowledge, as digital marketers, we want to be those disruptors, but when you think about it from a user experience standpoint, even your calls to action, they should be part of the experience. They should not be something that interrupts your user as they're trying to do something. So hopefully you've got that alignment where you're providing the need and you're providing the value. So I hope the session was useful to everyone today. Happy St. Patrick's Day again, and have a good rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.